Welcome back to the Private Parts Wellness, the podcast where we dive headfirst into life's messy, chaotic, and sometimes ridiculous truths about health, life, and everything in between. I am Jessica, your host, and I am a double board certified family nurse practitioner and menopause provider. And today we are talking about ADHD, aging, women, and BS sex. You know, the things nobody wants to put on an inspirational mug. I mean, I probably would, and we're tackling some big questions like, why do women with ADHD feel like life is a perpetual game of whack-a-mole? Do you remember that game, whack-a-mole? Trying to put out fires. Why hyper-focusing is a blessing and a curse, and how do you navigate intimacy when your brain is running in 12 directions? And one of them is thinking like, shit, I forgot to do that thing. And because we're not here for just science, we might talk a little bit about science, but very, very basic. We'll talk about hormones, we're going to talk about psychedelics, we're going to talk about herbal remedies and stuff like non-sleep deep relaxation. But hopefully you're going to come away with this thinking, that's why I have 120 tabs open. And I am 3 tabs short of crashing. All right. Enjoy. So let's talk about ADHD and ADHD in women in particular. Well, ADHD stands for Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder. And it is a very, very fucked up term if you think about it, because some of us might have hyperactive attention at times. And the hyperactivity may not be running around or fidgeting in these big ways, but quietly having hyperactivity in our minds and fidgeting, like skin picking, for example, or, and by the way, I'm not a psychologist. I'm going to tell you a lot about my personal experience with ADHD. I have ADHD. I'm really out about it because it felt like it was something that explained everything. I went through life as a kid, I think my kindergarten or my second grade, I don't know, one of my young report cards said, Jessica tells inappropriate adult jokes to the children. I was retaining a lot of information, and every parent-teacher conference was, Jessica is smart, and I'm not saying that I'm like the smartest person ever or anything like that, but like I'm relatively can put some thoughts together, right? Like, we don't get why she does so shitty in school. Shitty? See, I'm not that smart. But why she's doing so bad in school. And it wasn't until my kid was diagnosed and I was reading Super Parenting Your Child with ADHD, and I was thought, oh, that's me. I do that. Oh, yeah. And in this book, they talked about something to the effect of having ADHD is like having your brain that is a Ferrari. I've never been in a Ferrari. I have been in a Maserati, and I've been in an Alfa Romeo, and I've been in a Corvette. Was one of the first cars I ever drove. Been in fancy cars, but never a Ferrari. I don't really know if I'd want to because the sound might be too loud. Anyway, let me get back. So it's like having a Ferrari and with bicycle brakes. So it's kind of getting ahead of you. And I actually had that life experience with an actual fast car. Remember that Corvette I told you? That was one of the first cars I ever drove. And it scared me so much because it went from like 0 to 60, like super fast. I looked at Lee, who's like my godfather, and it was his beautiful Corvette. He loves a Corvette. And I was like, oh, I'm too scared to drive. So he's like, it's okay. And got out, and so we both got out of the car to switch positions, and I did not put it in park. The car was okay. I was okay. He was okay. Everyone was okay. It didn't go too fast. It was a dirt road. But yeah, at that point, the Corvette in my brain and the Corvette that I was sitting in were both going too fast. And the brakes were too slow. Anyway, when you add this idea of this fast-moving brain and the inappropriate breaks, and you add aging to that mix, suddenly it is as if you are driving this super fast car through a maze, blindfolded, while the world is screaming to you. You left the cabinet door open. There's some shame that happens with ADHD, and maybe we'll get into that, and maybe we won't. But there's some shame that happens with this spiral of ADHD. And remember those tabs I was talking about earlier? I was listening to this person, Allison, I forgot her last name, Allison Ashlyn, something like that. She talks about men and women. And I don't know how I feel about her work, but she talks about women being berry pickers and men. Now, by the way, I'm being very binary with this because I'm just going to be really binary with this. Okay? So if you are a person who, this is my disclaimer, when we're going to talk about hormonal changes, and we're going to talk about hormonal changes, and that can happen naturally through aging and menopause. It can happen surgically through menopause, and it can happen chemically, to all ways to put you into menopause, just to be clear here. Anyway. Oh, berry pickers. So this person talks about women look for the berries in the forest because she will then have her ability to say, like, that one's poison, that one's good, that one's edible, right? Where men are very focused on one thing. So there's this concept with society. I think there's some programming that happens that loves to call women, girls, scatterbrain, ditzy. Like, these are not things that are used to describe men. Instead of thinking of those of us who have all of those tabs open as neurodivergent. And I think that's one of the reasons that ADHD is often missed in girls and women. And when we add age to this or changes, and we'll just talk about the hormonal shifts that happen through aging, right? When we add those hormonal shifts, what happens is that the ADHD symptoms become louder. Now, I actually believe that there can be ways to see this in your fertile years as well. So you might notice a change when you are going to get your period, or you might notice if you've ever been pregnant that you may have something that is called placental steal syndrome, which is like a bullshit term, right? But the idea is that, like, the placenta gets bigger and then it kind of steals your brain cells. So you can't remember shit. And what happens is that in aging, as we move towards menopause and postmenopause, estrogen drops and the dopamine gets a little bit off kilter, off balance, wonky. And suddenly, maybe there's a spike in your estrogen because it's not, especially in perimenopause, like there might be spikes in estrogen. Remember that you actually don't need to call the tow place, that you actually parked it on a different street 3 blocks away on the proper side. Like, you did it on alternate side of the parking. Like, you did it all right, and you feel like you've won the lottery. And what's going on is that estrogen and dopamine work together. So what's dopamine? And dopamine is the thing that is most affected when it comes to ADHD. So dopamine is a chemical messenger, and it is involved with creating and controlling movement. Some of us are very clumsy. Very low dopamine can be the cause of Parkinson's. Do not be thinking that you have Parkinson's. Don't go into a spiral. Don't start researching that shit. But my grandfather had Parkinson's. Motivation. Dopamine is important in reinforcing and motivating actions. It's a feel-good hormone. It is involved in addiction, and it can also be part of depression. It works with memory, behavior, cognition, attention, sleep. And in AD, you have lower levels of dopamine. And estrogen plays a key role in dopamine production, which supports focus, pleasure, and your working memory. So there's a connection a lot of times between ADHD, PMS, PMDD, and PPD. So what the fuck are all those things, right? Premenstrual symptom, PMS, which is premenstrual syndrome. PMDD is premenstrual dysphoric disorder. So like where PMS is like a little bit of sadness and kind of like not feeling great, PMDD can manifest in joint pain, stomach issues, GI issues, depression, low motivation. It's a hot mess. And finally, PD, which would be postpartum depression. Now, for me, I was eventually diagnosed officially with ADHD in my late 50s, number one. Number two, I had had horrible postpartum depression in all three of my pregnancies, the second one being really scary. And PMS was a big thing for me. The decline of progesterone can also lead to lower dopamine as well. I want to talk about five classic ADHD behaviors that you may or know somebody who may be experiencing. Here's one of the problems with ADHD and perimenopause. I am recording this podcast right now. I have notes. Do I look at them? Kind of, not kind of, sort of. But right now, one of the classic things is that I do get distracted. So in my mind, I was like, let me give some real information about dopamine. It's kind of like knowing a word and then wanting to find out what the actual Webster definition or Oxford dictionary. Dictionaries are books where you look up words, right? Just in case you're young and you don't know. What is the actual definition of the word? Because you might have a sense of a word, you know what the word is, but you feel like, let me get it right. Here is a classic thing that just fucking happened. I wanted to look up ADHD, dopamine, which then I wanted to get those notes out about dopamine, which you just heard me say. And then, of course, I was like, well, now I'm sitting here while I'm recording this, and now I have to look up like ADHD, dopamine, women, ADHD, dopamine, hormones. I have lost my absolute fucking train of thought. Okay. And one of the things that is great about ADHD is hyperfocus. Hyperfocus, you sit down to check the email, and next thing you know, it is 3 a.m. and you have not only checked all of the email, but now you have designed a whole full ass website for your neighbor's cat. And you don't even like fucking cats, and you really were just agitated, and then you learn something about the hairless fucking cat that the neighbor has, and that's what you've done. And you think, like, this is great. Look at what I can do. Who knew I could design a website? And if you've followed me for a while, you'll see I'm doing that shit all the time, but now you've not slept. And who cares about the neighbor's fucking cat? So this is the hyperfocus that kind of just derails you and can be really helpful and useful in certain ways. Like when I think about, I love school and I'd like to probably get a terminal degree one day. And if I do get a terminal degree, like the idea of like deep diving on one subject is just so fucking exciting for me. But also that would mean that probably if people were dependent on me in the house to be fed, that will not happen because I will be hyper-focused on that one deep dive subject. So that's one thing that is a kind of wildly interesting classic ADHD behavior. The second behavior would be time blindness. So the first one's hyper-focus, second one is time blindness. So time blindness is time management. Like, what is that? Because the ADHD brain experiences time as now or not now. This is why you think it's fine to leave the house in 10 minutes and you're still like not even showered. Or for me, one of the things that I'll experience is that I will look at the clock and it is literally 20 minutes before I need to leave. Like I am on track. I am feeling good. I have gotten myself organized and I have 20 minutes. And then next thing I know, I am 10 minutes past the time I should have left. I don't know what I was doing. It's not disregard of other people's time and things I have to do, or there's no malice to it. It is literally like it was not now, and now it's past now. So time blindness. The third would be emotional dysregulation. Now, I think that age, and I don't know if you would say like wisdom that comes with age, because I don't know that wisdom and aging come together, but I think that the work that I've done in my personal life has really helped with this. But emotional dysregulation is something that is another classic ADHD trait. Sometimes it'll feel like a small disagreement turns into this full-blown emotional storm. The comment about the spoon or the cabinet or the burnt toast devolves into your own personal existential crisis. And the ADHD brain has like zero chill when it comes to rejection or criticism. I was recently watching this person who helps you to read faces and get cues and communicate better so that you can and I thought, this is going to drive me nuts. This is going to fucking drive me nuts. It was like even too much sensory because I'm I'm an extremely observant person. I think when I used to teach yoga, I could see like the left scapula was a little higher than the right scapula, or like if you could just lift this muscle on the right side, like connect the bottom ribs to the top of the hip area, just like a quarter of an inch, we could like straighten the back just a little bit more. Like I get nutty sometimes, right? With my ADHD brain, there's a lot of talking that I need to do. So even a raised eyebrow can feel like it's some kind of epic fucking tragedy. Not so much anymore now, but like I see it in other people. Number 4, and not everyone has these, right? There's always shades of gray with it. But number 4 is sensory sensitivities. You might notice that some people have like kids tags on their shirts, or the seam in the sock, or the sound of a fork on a plate. You know, some of that cellophane wrapper. Oh my God, it's making me want to cringe right now. Or, oh God, peas, the popping of peas. Like, wow. I mean, I'm probably doing that now, so I apologize if anyone does that. I mean, I don't really actually mind popping of peas, but you get the idea, right? It's like beyond nails on a chalkboard. That's a very universal, like unpleasant sound. But oh my God, certain textures of paper I can't take. Anyway, you get the idea. It's like a circus of sensory bullshit. It's like an amusement nightmare. And aging can make these even worse. I mean, I guess on the bright side, like you can be like, I only like silk, cotton, and leather, you know, for clothing. I don't know. And the last behavior or kind of, I don't know, trait maybe would be that I want to talk about. There are lots more. I'm sure you can name some yourself, is rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria. Now, this is new to me. I've never heard about this. This could be absolute bullshit. You probably are hearing a lot about it on the interwebs if you are interested in ADHD. But let's go back to that concept of like the emotional dysregulation, but also the time blindness. Like you can even probably think about how all of these things might add to this shame spiral that I mentioned earlier. So rejection, sensitivity, dysphoria is basically this almost inappropriate reaction to feeling like you're being rejected. It's an intense, irrational, deeply felt emotion that is tied to ADHD. And I think it's like, I used to coach people one-on-one, and we would talk about math problems of the situation. I would talk about these math problems. where sometimes I would have to take a step back and think about, especially in intimate relationships, think about what the reality was, like as if it is math. The beauty of algebra, I'm saying, like I can't do too much more. So usually I can solve for X. When I used to do coaching on one-on-one level, like one-on-ones with people, and sometimes I still do, especially it depends on, I do a lot of group work now. Okay, you don't care about that, but when I would do one-on-ones and we would talk about intimate relationships, I would think about myself and I'd think about the work that I would have to do. And I would look at it as solving for X, a math problem, because usually in algebra, in a lot of math, there's an actual answer. I'm not talking about like your advanced fucking math that I can't do, right? But in the math that I am capable of doing, there's an answer. So I'd have to take the reaction or the action or whatever it was and look at it as math and find out what the answer was, and was my reaction appropriate to the action? Was I truly being rejected, or was it a distortion? Does that make sense? Rejection sensitivity dysphoria is a true and real thing. But let's talk a little bit about that shame spiral that I think happens. I think because those of us that think maybe a little bit differently, let's think about time blindness, right? We're told we're irresponsible. Can't you just leave earlier? Get organized, set up, do this. People love to give us on how to do life better and differently. And I'm not saying that we should try. It's just that sometimes we get so wrapped up in our failings that we experience shame. And then the shame turns into emotional dysregulation. And the emotional dysregulation is not really about the burnt toast or whatever the issue was, that whatever my example was, right? It's about kind of all the other times that you tried to do right and fucked up. And so for me, realizing that some of these things are kind of basic, typical ADHD took the pressure off. And knowing that my hormones could, or lack of them, could help to support was extremely, extremely freeing for myself and my family. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But let's talk about sex. Let's talk about sex. It can be pretty complicated. The biggest sex organ that you have is your brain, period. Period, period, period. I think second to your brain would be your skin. And to enjoy sex, I think it's a lot of mood setting for some. And I'm talking about like, even like you could be DTF. Do you know what that means? Down to fuck. And that's not like where you have to have like a lot of mood, but mostly when you're DTF, like there's been some setup in your brain prior to. So there's always some preparation that happens. And those 5 traits that we talked about, you can also think how those might play into it. But 2 of the things that make it really complicated are distractibility, right? So imagine you're trying to be present through this intimacy, but your brain is thinking like, the kid's up. Is the door locked? What time is pickup? Whatever your shit is, right? And you're not being present in that moment. The other thing that can happen is the hyper focus in the bedroom. So while that's kind of like the beauty of it, where maybe you get super hyper focused and then you can be absolutely present. So I don't know if like that's not a negative, right? The hyper focus could help. And like if you like you're checked in, then you're really checked in. And this can actually lead to more creativity in the bedroom, more spontaneity, more energy. And frankly like more fun. But the flip side again is emotional dysregulation and that whole RSD, which is rejection, sensitive dysphoria. And they can make it again tricky, especially if you are interpreting small kind of comments as rejection, or maybe your partner gets distracted, or they have their own kind of, they're allowed to have their own mind, right? And their own thinking on things. And again, it's like your brain is running like a full on telenovela, full volume, while you're just trying to connect. So one of the tips for your partner, if you are not the one that has ADHD, is to be patient and also to use humor. And hopefully, because sex is kind of like actually very ridiculous. And if you're kind of laughing and having a good time, well, then it's an absolute win. So I did want to talk a little bit about sex. And that's all I'm going to say about that. So let's just start to wrap this up. So what the fuck to do about it, right? One of the biggest things that you need for ADHD is some of the things that help with ADHD are exercise, right? Because that helps to boost dopamine naturally. Foods that have something called tyrosine, which is our eggs, dairy, beef, turkey, chicken, avocado, soy. Like those are things that are really, really rich in tyrosine. And it's interesting because I crave eggs and avocado all the fucking time. Like that. They also are high in magnesium too, which is really good and chills you out, right? And obviously having somebody to talk to about it. Now, people will say like cognitive behavioral therapy, which is like these kind of repatterning. Like I personally hate that, but that's just me. That's just me. You may love it. And I do like an actual task, right? But anyway, there are other ways or different ways. And this is here's the disclaimer. This is not a recommendation. Talk to your provider, talk to your people about this. Do not take it from me, but we will talk about some of the ways to manage it. So medication is obviously the most typical way to handle it. So we're thinking stimulants like Ritalin, Adderall, Vyvanse, and they work great for some people, but not everyone. For some folks, they can have anxiety or irritability, or like me, they can make you feel sleepy and dull. So I don't, but they're not going to, with those kind of medications, remember, they're not going to go ahead and take care of some of the underlying issues that you may have, like habits or trauma that you need to deal with. An off-label brand or an off-label medication would be Wellbutrin, which has been known to help with the anxiety and depression that may come as a result of ADHD. Because usually for a lot of folks, anxiety, depression, and ADHD go hand in hand. And one amazing, amazing psychiatric nurse practitioner, she's amazing. She was like, sometimes when we take care of the ADHD, the anxiety and the depression are resolved. So something to think about. The other thing is if you are in a place where hormone replacement therapy, menopause replacement hormonal therapy is appropriate, that can help because declining levels of estrogen make ADHD worse for some of us. So HRT can be helpful to regain focus and balance. But again, it's not a universal fix and it may not be appropriate for you. Psychedelics are another way that some people are tackling ADHD. So microdosing psilocybin is something that people are starting to look into for emotional regulation and focus. And again, that is pretty much not legal. And there's also a lot of mindset that needs to be changed around that, especially if you're of a certain generation that like Nancy Reagan was frying eggs and shit. If you know, but a lot of people have found it super, super helpful. And actually, we're going to be talking about alternatives. Well, I'll get to that in a second. Ashwagandha is a herbal supplement that is used for stress. Ginkgo biloba is for focus. L-theanine is for calming. And these are very popular, but for some people, they don't work. Some people are allergic to them. And also, like with ashwagandha, you need to use like bakaiba. I think that's what it's called, in combination. This is like, you definitely want to talk to somebody, even when it's considered natural or herbal. You want to definitely talk to a provider who knows what they're talking about before you dive into this. Because think about it, poison ivy is natural, but I would not put that smoothie nor wipe my ass with a poison ivy leaf. Okay. Another thing that is pretty benign and helpful, I find extremely helpful, is non-sleep deep relaxation. So non-sleep deep relaxation is a kind of non-yogic word for yoga nidra, which is a practice of releasing and relaxing the entire body and mind, but not sleeping. It is such a deep space of relaxation that you can allow the brain to kind of calm down, rest, and actually feel as if your brain is more refreshed at the end of even 10-12 minutes. So this is something that I use quite often because sleep is so important for people with ADHD. And just as we're aging, and, I did an episode on sleep, so you can find that. But sleep is so important. And sometimes I don't get enough sleep. I do not get enough sleep. And when I don't get enough sleep and I have a full day of seeing patients, of taking care of my family, the combination of both, I will actually do a non-sleep deep relaxation for 15-20 minutes before starting my day. So you can find those on YouTube. And if anything, it is something that I recommend to everyone, whether you are neurodivergent or not. Sleep deep relaxation is pretty fucking amazing. But again, I am here, even though I am a nurse practitioner, this is not a prescription for you. This is just some information, and you will absolutely need to talk to your own provider before diving into any of these options. And when I say provider, I am not talking about Dr. Google. Dr. Google is not your provider. Thank you. And your friend. This is the newest thing I've thought of. Like, but my friend went through this, and my friend did this, and my friend did that. Let me tell you something. Your friend is like the mid-level provider, like the physician assistant of Dr. Google. Don't listen to your friend. I mean, you can listen to it, but file that shit back in the back of your mind, right? It's interesting information, but nothing you should hold on to, because you are not your friend. Anyway, that's what I have to say about that. But these are five ways. Is it five? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. See, I told you I was using some notes here. These are 5 things that may help you to deal with or support and definitely take the pressure off of ADHD. So hopefully this was interesting information. Now, I'm going to ask you for a big favor, because now I've divulged something very personal about myself. You now know that I am neurodivergent. And one of the things that I need for my dopamine hit is your interaction. So if you want to learn more, if you want me to talk about different things, please leave a comment, leave a suggestion, send me an email. You can email me at pwfnp@gmail.com. That's PPW as in private parts wellness, NP family nurse practitioner, ppwfnp@gmail.com. And let me know if you want to go on the mailing list. Let me know what you thought about this. Leave a like, leave a comment, share with a friend. Give me feedback, because my dopamine needs it. That's one of the hardest things with making a podcast, right? There is no actual feedback back and forth. You never know if people are receiving what you are putting out. So give me that. I love that. Thank you. It doesn't cost anything, doesn't take a lot of time, and it is doing so much to help me help you or support you. You know what I'm saying? I couldn't really think of the words. Anyway, that's that. Until next time, stay fabulous, stay chaos. Actually, I want to say something else. And if you email me at ppwfnp@gmail.com, let me know if you want to be on the mailing list, because I will let you know what's going on. And I will let you know if what's going on with the Menno Circle. If you are interested in working with me one-on-one, seeing me in New York, or being involved in my online community, let me know. I also just started a Discord. So yeah, cool stuff. Okay. That's that. If you have giggled, snickered, learned, or just felt seen today, do me a favor and feed my little dopamine by subscribing, leaving a review, sharing this episode with someone who needs a little irreverent joy in their life. Until next time, stay fabulous, stay chaotic, and don't forget to set a timer. Okay, bye.